and welcome back to the most amazing channel on the internet. I'm your host Rebecca Felgate, and this is the top 10 scary wedding stories. What should have been the happiest day of some of the people on this list's lives turned into a real-life horror story. Find out more as we get into this list. Before we do that though, why don't you guys tell me how many weddings you've been to and what role you played. For example, I have been a bridesmaid 4 times. Very exciting. I love a good wedding as well. Any chance to drink and dance all day and just eat a lot of food. While you guys are down there leaving me a comment, why don't you also leave a thumbs up and share this video with a friend. Also, if you guys want to connect with me on social media, my link to my Instagram is in the description box. See you over there. Alright, scary weddings, what we got? Coming in at number 10, we have Anna Baker's wedding dress. Old mansions tend to have ghost stories affixed to them, but I have to say this ghost story is a little bit out of the ordinary. While the house itself is rumoured to be haunted, the main topic of conversation when it comes to paranormal activity here is a haunted dress, a wedding dress. Now this is kept in the mansion termed museum and people can still visit it today. The Baker Mansion is a historic home dating back to 1844 and was the home to wealthy ironmaster Elias Baker. Elias and his wife had 4 children, but one of them died of diphtheria. Their only surviving daughter, Anna, was a spinster and lived at the house until her death in 1914. It is not that she lived without love, however, just the love that she had was forbidden by her father. It seems that Anna fell in love with a local iron worker, but her father considered him to be lowborn and not good enough for his daughter. Anna even bought a wedding dress to try and convince her father that she was serious, but he still forbade the union and the dress went unworn, by Anna at least. Some years later, when her love had moved on, another woman wore the dress. Wearing Anna's intended wedding dress, Elizabeth Bell was said to have mocked Anna for having never taken a husband. Anna died an old woman in the mansion left to her by her family in Pennsylvania. It seems that her spirit never left though. It haunts the wedding dress that remains on the property and now makes up part of the museum. The dress used to be kept behind glass and was often reported to move of its own accord, one day falling heavily against the glass during a thunderstorm. Others said when they looked into the glass at the dress, they would catch the reflection of a woman staring back at them. Some say the dress moves because of the old floorboards in the display cabinet being weak and subject to kind of moving around a bit. Others swear that they feel her presence when they look at her dress. Who knows? Coming into number 9, we have the exploding wedding gift. In February 2018, tragedy struck an Indian couple who had just celebrated their wedding in Odisha, India. The pair had returned home with their wedding gifts after several days of celebration. I actually went to an Indian wedding earlier this year and I experienced firsthand what a great big party it all is. Several days, loads of food, drink, dancing, merriment. It truly is a happy occasion and a big deal. Sadly, when the newlyweds got home and were opening their presents among their family, one of the gifts they had received at the reception exploded, killing the groom and severely injuring the bride. Sadly, also the groom's grandmother died in the blast. Following on from the incident, police were trying to identify who had gifted the couple the package and what their motivation was. Right now, they are still being sought for murder, and I really hope that this case gets solved. Coming into number 8, we have a bride's bouquet crashing a plane. Weddings are a bit ridiculous sometimes. In my opinion, weddings are supposed to be about 2 people who love each other making a commitment to love each other forever. Some people want to do this in low-key ceremonies, others want to do this in big, huge, costly ceremonies. Sometimes wanting to throw an impressive party and upstaging other couples is more of a focus than the love part. In 2009, a couple wanted to make a big deal of the bouquet toss, a tradition in many Western weddings. Basically, they pulled out all of the stops and hired a plane to fly over a line of women standing below. Sadly, when the flowers were thrown out of the plane, they were sucked straight on back into the engine, causing it to catch fire and explode. The plane crashed in a field in front of onlookers. Luckily, neither of the 2 people in the plane died, but the bride was seriously injured, suffering facial and cranial trauma. Even worse, at number 7, we have another crash, and this time it was deadly. A tragic video recorded by the wedding photographer captured the moment a bride died on the way to her wedding in a helicopter. Brazilian bride Rosemary do Nascimento Silva chose to arrive at her wedding in a helicopter as a surprise for her fiancé. Sadly, as he waited at the altar, the helicopter carrying the bride, her brother, the pregnant photographer, and the pilot crashed, killing all on board. Now the footage is totally heartbreaking. We see how beautiful and happy and excited the bride looks as she's on her way to the ceremony. Sadly, then the footage turns nightmarish as an alarm can be heard going off. Footage starts to shake and the passengers scream. The groom was told about his bride's death at the altar. How devastating. Coming into into number 6, we have the rather creepy tradition of Chinese ghost weddings. Usually I absolutely love East Asian countries because to me as a Westerner, some of their traditions can be a little quirky and I like that. This tradition, however, is both quirky and scary and not necessarily in a good way. In some Chinese cultures, they believe that if a man dies without getting married, then his soul will haunt his living relatives for the rest of their lives, causing bad luck as he does so. What to do about this then? Obvious, right? Get him married. But wait, he's dead. No problemo, get him a ghost wedding. A ghost wedding is a ceremony where a man's corpse is married off. Luckily not to a living lady, but a dead lady. Creepy. The families still have the whole party and everything, and they have a little paper bride and groom at the top table feast. While this seems like it would be an alright deal, kill 2 already dead birds with 1 stone, it does pose a whole load of ethical questions and encourages grave robbing. That's right, the dead male needs a dead lady to marry, and bodies sell for a lot of money on the black market. Understandably, people are upset when the remains of their family loved ones are stolen away and buried next to some dude they'd never knew in real life. It gets worse too. With a shortage of graves to rob, some people have even turned to murder. In 2016, a man was arrested in northwest China for killing 2 women with mental disabilities and selling their bodies as corpse brides. Coming into number 5, we have this SRIRANGAM marriage hall fire. So this is actually so sad. Back in January 2004, fire tore through a makeshift wedding hall in southern India. The fire occurred in the famous temple town of SRIRANGAM, and the reception hall was a makeshift pavilion with a thatched roof on the terrace of a 1-story building. It is thought that as celebrations were underway, a fire started as a result of an electrical short circuit from fairy lights catching fire. Sadly, the blaze spread very quickly, burning the guests alive. Others who died were crushed in a stampede as they tried to escape the flames. 45 people in total were killed, including the groom. The bride was seriously injured. This story is an old East Texan piece of folklore at number 4. We have something like a mashup scene between Game of Thrones and Peaky Blinders. We have the story of the poisoned cake. In May 1847, the Texas Telegraph and Register of Houston reported that in San Augustine, 70 of 80 people attending a wedding on the evening of the 22nd of April were taken ill and 10 died from the effects of poison. It actually turns out that, from examining an old letter from a local doctor anyway, it seems that 17 people died and a further 15 were dangerously ill. So what happened? The bride was an orphan raised by a dubious man called Mr. Wilkinson. Her choice of husband was also said to be from the rough side of the tracks. Despite the bad characters involved, the local community were keen for a party. And old man Wilkinson even invited his previous foes, although one family, the Sanders family, declined the invitation. For some reason or another, Manic Wilkinson tampered with the cakes for the wedding. Unbeknownst to the Sanders family, he sent them slices of the wedding cake as what looked like a gesture of goodwill. Little did they know they were laced with arsenic. So too was the wedding cake served at the actual wedding ceremony itself. Everyone but the Wilkinsons tucked into the food. They all, including the bride, survived, but unfortunately the same couldn't be said for a number of the other guests. It seems that the whole wedding was a ruse by old man Wilkinson to bump off his enemies. 3 members of the Sanders family died after eating the packaged up cake, as did 17 wedding guests. The wedding turned into a scene from the Red Wedding as guests started dying in the reception hall, groaning and vomiting in a way more dramatic way than King Joffrey's death at the Purple Wedding. It wasn't a perfect crime though. Wilkinson had hoped that the deaths could be shrugged off as simple food poisoning, but when his family remained untouched by illness, local authorities were deeply suspicious. He was brought before a magistrate but managed to escape on a horse. The events that transpired 161 years ago still remain one of the worst cases of mass murder in East Texas. Coming into number 3, we have the Brazilian groom rampage. In December 2010, a groom in Brazil went ballistic, opening fire at his reception of 200 guests. So, what happened to turn what was supposed to be the happiest day of this man's life into a bloodbath in which his wife and best man were killed? It seems that Rogério Damasenka and Retina Alexandra Costa Colas' wedding was off to a normal start. The pair exchanged vows, smiled for pictures, and ate at their wedding reception. As late-night speeches were being delivered, the groom said he had a surprise for his wife. He then produced a .38 caliber pistol and shot her, then his best man. He shot them several times, making sure that they were dead. Then he turned the gun on himself, shooting himself through the head. All 3 of them died, and a further guest was injured as a bullet grazed them. The massacre took place at 2 a.m. in front of 200 guests. After the murder-suicide, it was revealed that the groom suspected his wife had been having an affair with his best man. How awful. Coming Coming into number 2, we have the Kampala wedding massacre. What happened at a wedding in Kampala, Uganda that left 27 people dead? Irene, 80, was attending her friend's wedding when a male guest, Richard Komikech, a private in the Ugandan military, asked her to dance. She didn't fancy it, declining his offer. He then started getting pretty persistent, and she declined him again. Now this is when he got aggressive. He started being very raucous, and as a result he was thrown out of the party. This didn't sit well with him. He went home, got a semi-automatic rifle, and returned. He killed Irene first, then opened fire randomly at guests. 14 people died on the spot, and 12 more in hospital. Komikech tried to kill himself but failed, pretending to be dead. Then, when police arrived, he basically still pretended to be dead. In an even more dramatic turn of events, Irene's father realized he was still alive, broke through the police cordon, and killed Komikech by smashing in his skull. Oh my goodness. Finally, coming into number 1, we have a serious and persistent issue, the scariest wedding stories of them all that happen all over the world each year. We have the story of child brides. There really is no scarier wedding story than that of child brides. It's happened throughout history and it is still happening today. Girls as young as 11 are being married off to men often several decades older than them. Some of the youngest child brides have still been toddlers. It's totally abhorrent. Niger is the worst country for child brides, with 76% of children married before they're 18 and 28% married before 15. Regionally in differ, 89% of girls marry as children. Other offenders at the top of the child marriage rate list are the Central African Republic, Chad, Bangladesh, India, Mali, South Sudan, Guinea, Mozambique, Somalia, and Brazil. It isn't even developing nations either. In the UK, up to 8,000 people are at risk of being forced into young marriage. Between 2000 and 2010, over 250,000 children in the United States have been married, mainly to adult men. 25 states to the USA don't even have a minimum marriage age law. I read Nora Al-Sham's account of her own marriage when she was 11 to a man in his 30s. Now, the marriage took place in Yemen. She recalls her initial delight at the 3-day event, being allowed to wear 3 beautiful dresses. However, she recalled her fear when the celebrations were over and she was left alone with her husband. She said he was 3 times my age and saw marriage as a means to act like a depraved animal. After she slept with her husband for the first time, she was rushed to hospital. She said, "I was a child being treated as a sex object, but the abuse did not stop. Nobody was interested in my complaints, as I was legally a wife." How absolutely repugnant and horrifying is that? Child marriage is a real-life horror story being forced on millions of young girls worldwide, and it absolutely needs to be stopped. So guys, that was the top 10 scary wedding stories. I'm actually now pretty terrified of walking down the aisle, but you know, maybe I'll never do it. Just sounds safer that way. And cheaper. So there we go. Don't forget to tell me whether or not you've been to a wedding and what role you played. And why not share some happy wedding stories after this frankly frightening list? Also, make sure you leave a thumbs up on this video and share it with a friend. I'm your host, Rebecca Felgate, and I'll see you in the next video.